Now that we've looked at what a major scale and minor scale can produce in terms of triads, and we've seen how those patterns work, let's look at what changes when we use the melodic and harmonic versions of the minor scale. We know that the minor scale pattern results in a minor 1, diminished 2, major 3, minor 4, minor 5, major 6, and major 7. This is A natural minor, and that's every minor pattern right there. But if I use harmonic minor, I'm going to raise scale degree 7. In this case, I'm going to raise G sharp. So I'll find all the G sharps, this one here, this one here, and this one here. By changing one note in the scale, I've changed three different chords, because it's the root of this chord, the third of this chord, and the fifth of this chord. So all three of those chords change. This before was a major 3, and I've raised the top note, which means that now it's an augmented 3. Before, this was a minor 5, and I've raised the middle note, so that means now it's a major 5. And this was a major 7, and I've raised the bottom note, decreasing the bottom interval, which means that now that's a diminished 7. So by simply changing one scale degree, I've changed 3 of the chords, almost half of the chords. And I have my augmented 3, major 5, and diminished 7. You'll possibly notice that the major 5 and the diminished 7, in this case E major and G sharp minor, are both chords from the parallel major key. So in this case, my major 5, E major, is the same chord as in A major, the parallel major of A minor. And my G sharp diminished 7 chord is the same chord as my G sharp diminished 7 in A major. When we were first learning about these scales, we were learning that the harmonic minor and melodic minor borrow pitches from their parallel major counterparts. So in the same way that the scale borrows pitches, the chord progression borrows chords as well. So you can think that this chord and this chord, not the 3, that's another little situation we'll talk about later, but those two chords are going to be the same in both major and harmonic minor. And it's because of this leading tone. It's so important that we have that leading tone to drive the harmony forward, to drive the scale forward, that this form of minor, harmonic minor, is so incredibly common for chord progressions, which is why we call it harmonic minor. Composers love the major 5 chord and what that chord does to progressions. It moves the progression forward, it gives drive and intensity toward a cadence, toward the end of a phrase. So that's our harmonic minor. But let's talk about melodic minor for a second. Melodic minor is going to keep that raised scale degree 7, but it's also going to raise scale degree 6. In this case, F natural to F sharp. So I'm going to find all of the F naturals and raise them to F sharp. Which means that all 3 of those chords are now different. In this case, I had a diminished chord and I increased the top note, so that becomes a minor chord. In this case, I had a minor chord and I raised the third, so this becomes a major chord. In this case, I had a major chord and I raised the root, decreasing the bottom interval, turning that into a diminished chord. Now, These chords ended up pretty strange. We've got two diminished chords and an augmented chord. There's a lot of instability going on with this, which is one of the reasons why melodic minor is not as common or as suited for creating harmonic progressions or chord progressions. Melodic minor is fantastic at creating energizing melodies that drive toward the tonic and then fall away from them with the sad and sorrowful passages that we're used to a minor key having. But it's not so awesome at creating chord progressions, and composers will very rarely use melodic minor to harmonize a chord progression. If they did, however, we would end up with a couple more chords that were the same as the major key. So that is interesting because in this case now we have four chords that are the same as the major key. And like what we talked about when we were learning about melodic minor as a scale, too much of a good thing is not really a good thing anymore. Too many of those interesting notes taken from major and put into minor, and we lose the sense of identity of that key and that scale. So this is the pattern for melodic minor: minor, minor, augmented, major, major, diminished, diminished. And it's a very, very strange one. I wouldn't worry too much about memorizing this. This is where it comes in handy for you to be able to memorize the natural minor pattern and then analyze the chords and how they're changed. So even though we know the Roman numerals, if we put an accidental in there that changes the chord from what the key signature tells me it should be, I can't rely on the Roman numeral anymore, and I have to analyze the chord using all the systems that we've previously discussed or previously learned. That's why it's important that you still know those things. But learning Roman numerals can also create much quicker answers and shortcuts for you as well. So, to recap, my major pattern is major, minor, minor, major, major, minor, and diminished. My minor pattern is minor, diminished, major, minor, minor, major, major. Learning that pattern, committing it to memory, means that instead of having to analyze chords, you simply need to know what is the root and what scale degree is that note.